Hello, Fernando. Welcome to the CEIS20 Podcast, and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for inviting me.
I would like to introduce you first and foremost. Fernando Racimo is an associate professor of ecology and evolution at the University of Copenhagen in Denmark. He's originally trained as an evolutionary geneticist, but these days he's largely working on research and teaching around degrowth, decolonization, and socio-ecological transformation. He's an active member in various movements and collectives struggling for such a transformation, most notably Scientists Rebellion and Academics for Palestine. Thank you again for being with us, and I'd like to begin with our first question, which is a standard question for all our guests, and that is, who are you? And I'll introduce you a bit. What do you do, and where you basically develop your research?
Yeah, as you say, I'm an associate professor in Copenhagen. My background is in evolutionary biology and ecology, but over the past 5 years I've been involved in various social movements, particularly the ones you mentioned. Scientists Rebellion is one of them, and it has changed me as both a scientist but also as an activist, and that's part of what I wanted to do in the book, sort of tell a bit of what that movement was about, how it evolved, how it originated, and the experiences of other scientists that have changed themselves as they joined this movement.
Yeah. I would like mostly to talk about the book, and the book is titled "Science in Resistance: The Scientists Rebellion for Climate Justice," and you stated in the opening of the book that this book is a call to rebellion. So tell us what you mean exactly by this, and what drove you to take such a strong stance to call upon the scientists for climate struggle.
Yeah. So, I mean, as we all know, we are in a massive polycrisis, right? We're living through climate breakdown, collapse of so many ecosystems across the planet, the rise now of authoritarianism and fascism across many places, including here in Europe. And I think a lot of scientists, a lot of academics are coming to terms with this, realizing that just publishing more papers is not enough, that we have a special responsibility as scientists, as academics, as people that know about this crisis, have produced so much scholarship about this crisis, to realize that perhaps we need to find other ways to engage with society about this. And so many, including the people in the movement, are starting to take different tactics, try out different types of strategies to see how we can better engage with society in order to enact the much needed socio-ecological transformation across so many spheres, right? So we need to immediately decarbonize our societies. We need to degrow our economies. We need to find a way to organize ourselves in a way that serves well-being, that serves the planet, serves the people, rather than serving extractive logics of capital and profit accumulation. And so this movement is trying to do part of that. It's trying to say, look, as scientists, we have a special responsibility. We need to step out of the lab and into the streets. We need to engage better with people about the massive transformation that we're facing. And that was sort of the impulse of the founders of this movement back in 2020, acknowledging that a lot of this science policy bridges that have been built over the last 30 years, the COPs, the IPCC reports, the IPBES reports, while they've produced lots of knowledge about the crisis, so far they have failed to enact the transformation that we need, and we need other tactics. So this is what we're trying to do as a movement.
Good. So what do you think prevents more scientists becoming more involved, participate in activism?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there's a lot of barriers to engaging in activism that scientists themselves mention. I mean, there's been studies about sort of barriers to activism, famous one by Fabian Devlander and colleagues, and some of them are just practical. There are maybe scientists feel like they don't have enough time, or that they don't know of other activists with whom they can engage, or they don't have the tools to participate in activism. But there's also more intellectual barriers that scientists might argue, like there's the figure of sort of scientific neutrality, like scientists should be detached from the world that they investigate, they should remain separate from that world. I think there's different ways to address these different barriers. The practical barriers is part of what the movement is trying to do, trying to provide spaces for scientists to connect, not just with each other, but with other activists that have a lot of experience to provide about how to organize for change through protest, through direct action, through mobilization, through participating in political activities. But the more intellectual barriers, the sort of idea of scientific neutrality, that maybe goes a little bit deeper to the core of what it means to be a scientist. And a lot of what we're trying to do is also address those barriers, kind of deconstruct this idea that scientists should be neutral, because usually just the neutral position always amounts to the status quo, whatever is accepted right now, today, December 2nd, in this particular location, right? And there is quite a long history of scientists who acknowledge that, scientific neutrality is not a real thing, that we have always been embedded, or continues to be embedded in societies. We have moral values, we have emotions that drive our activities, even as scientists, right? As medical scientists, conservation biologists, public health specialists, we want to try to improve the world, not just study it separate from it. So there is quite a lot of history of activism in academic circles through the civil rights movement, the pacifist movements, many decolonial movements in which academics and students participated in. And I think we need to resurface a lot of that history. Remember that academia has often played a part in social transformations, and that really this claim to scientific neutrality just claims to maintain, is a claim to maintaining things as they are. And right now, as an activist that I interviewed in my book says, the status quo right now is a deadly state of being. So we need to step up.
Yeah, that's it's a really fascinating description of this discomfort that you're trying to, I think, instill in all of us. But I that's sort of like I can tell you my own sort of not resistance, but like. Maybe my more passive stance on all of these, and it has to do with something you also mentioned in the book, which is the problem or the danger of being fired or arrested, and science and academia, most of academics have like very precarious jobs, and so and especially I think there's this discomfort of being of breaking the law, and you've been arrested in some of your actions before for civil disobedience. Well, it is clear that you state a policy of nonviolence, but you do. There's a point where scientist rebellion stresses also the importance of being arrested and practicing civil disobedience. Is this symbolic, or is this important?
Yeah, so I should say civil disobedience is one tactic among many. There's a lot of things that can be done beyond civil disobedience. I think scientist rebellion was quite good at opening up that tactic among academic circles, which before was something that had not been explored, at least in recent times. But I think one thing to stress, first of all, is that we all have our particular vulnerabilities, our particular privileges, and so the movement doesn't ask everybody to participate in civil disobedience. Like, there's a lot of people that are members of the movement that are doing all kinds of things related to logistics and strategy and communication, dealing with media, with social media, all of these roles that don't involve you sort of gluing to a road, but are completely crucial in order for any kind of action to happen. And there's actions that involve civil disobedience and direct action, but there's also many other actions that don't involve breaking the law. And I think it's important to stress that there's a lot of things involved in mobilizing for change that don't involve civil disobedience or other forms of direct action. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing I want to say is, like you mentioned, sort of the risk of the precarity that dominates academia today. And this is something I explore in my book as well, because beyond all the arguments, the practical arguments about sort of not having time, not having skills, or the more rational arguments about scientific neutrality, I try to argue in the book that there's a deeper reason why there aren't more scientists joining in social movements, and that has to do with the structure of academia today. Particularly the neoliberalization of academic structures in the last 4 decades. There's other scholars that have talked about this, the theory of academic capitalism, how academia in the last years has basically been plugged into systems of profit making and extraction, transformed in order to serve capital over people, and that in turn leads to very, very difficult dynamics inside academia, sort of the pressure to produce things that are measurable, so an obsession with metrics that measure what is produced, and also an environment of hyper competition and precarity where everybody is sort of worried about their jobs, about whether they're going to be able to have a job a year from now or 2 years from now. All of these conditions turn academia into a system that essentially is very profitable for corporations, but is very, it creates strong deterrents for engaging in the things that really matter to academics. So a lot of academics know that we are suffering through climate breakdown, through ecological collapse, but they are very afraid that if they even sort of say something outside of their sort of the narrow confines of what they're allowed to say within the academy, they might run into trouble. And I think this is something that we need to work on as well. First of all, we need to work on the academic structures that prevent engagement. We need to work on making academia less precarious, making academia more democratic, and remembering that universities are good in themselves. They're not just good because they produce patents or because they produce startups, but they are good in themselves. There are nice places where we can have knowledge production and learning and teaching and research. We need to remember what purposes universities serve, and figuring out whether those purposes are actually in the service of the societies in which they're embedded. So when we think about the barriers to activism, we really need to think about the very structures in which generally academics are doing their everyday jobs.
Yeah, you provide a highly critical view of the academic institutions as well as they stand in the book, and the need, especially I took notice on the need to democratize from within. And you've mentioned it again in this previous answer. But, so how would that look like in practice? How can we as academics, if we want to participate, like how do you think, what are some of the practical things we can do to affect these changes?
Yeah, like you mentioned, there is a whole chapter in my book about sort of envisioning academic futures in which universities are actually servicing social transformation rather than being complicit in fossil capitalism and fossil colonialism. And I think there's several things that we can do as academics. One, I would say the first one is join social movements that are in your local area. Scientist Rebellion might be one of them, but there's many others. But we also need to work on strengthening our labor power, remembering that we're not just academics, we're workers. So we're joining our unions, strengthening our unions and radicalizing our unions, trying to find connections between labor struggles, even as academics, and climate struggles, environmental struggles, because they are very related to each other. Thinking about the managerial logics that have proliferated in academia and how could they be done. There was a time when many universities, a lot of leadership positions were democratically decided by their faculty, by their staff, by their students, and a lot of that has been replaced by boards that are often chosen by either politicians or corporate leaders and that dictate top-down how a university is supposed to operate. So thinking about sort of university reform and transformation from within, but also putting pressure through social movement, through different tactics. And also remembering that beyond the faculty, beyond the students, universities cannot run without their cooking staff, without their cleaning staff, without their gardening staff. A lot of these are also precarized positions. So remembering that academia is not just the top professors in their field, it's also everybody who actually makes them run. That's
exactly that. That's exactly right. And this we noticed as we entered, right? That just this building, that the fact that we're doing this interview requires like a bunch of people that are not academics per se, but that work within the academic environment, and that allows us now to take this message as well to more people through this podcast. So absolutely. I want to take now a more personal view on this interview. I mean, some of the people watching this might not know, but you are a reference in your field. And like many of us, you stated, it's also in the book, and knowing you for some years now, that being a scientist has been a dream for you since you were a child, and you've climbed this academic ladder. You're a sort of a textbook example of success in academia, but this struggle you embrace now necessarily takes some of the energy, some of the focus on something that is so precious for you, and that you've worked hard and passionately for. So how difficult has this been, or has it been easy actually to take this leap?
Yeah, I think there's been some difficult aspects of it and some easy aspects of it, but I'm not the only one doing this. There's many scientists who are passionate about their field and are joining social movements increasingly. I think one of the things to keep in mind is like, yes, I love studying the world. I love ecology and evolution. That's sort of been my passion, as you said, since I was a child. But at the same time, it's increasingly difficult to me to sort of study a world that is actively being killed, that is dying, and sort of trying to fit an academic persona where my only response to that is we just need to study it some more, and then we need to study it some more, and maybe we're going to ask the people that are doing the killing to give us some more money so we can keep studying it some more, or we're going to ask them to pretty please stop killing the planet. So I think beyond the studying of this beautiful world that we have, I think we do have this sort of added responsibility of preventing the killing, stopping the killing. So my activism is partly motivated for my love for biology, for the natural world, for the more than human world. At the same time, as I engage in activism, as it happens with many scientists, many academics that are joining social movements, one of the things that happens is that you start interacting with other people with other backgrounds, other scientific backgrounds, other academic backgrounds, and other non-scientific backgrounds. So I think activism to me also has served as a way to sort of break silos and sort of find other disciplines that are in many ways much more informative of really the crisis that we're living through, the collapse that we're living through, and that have helped me understand better why we are where we are today. And part of that has to do with academia, but it also has to do with learning from other people that are not academics, that are perhaps local environmental defenders, indigenous defenders, social movement participants that know a lot about how capital has advanced over so much of our lives, of our territories, of our land, and how we can resist and build new worlds out of that.
Yeah, that last point takes me to my last question, because I have actually a quote from the book, and we are at the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies, and I took a quote from your book that says, "As we begin to participate in activism, we come to realize that barriers between scientific silos are not conducive to transformational change." So this is a central premise as well for the research that people do here at the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies. So I would like you to maybe in the last sort of like question for this is how is this important in the dialogue from the fight for climate justice?
I think it's absolutely crucial. It's often thought like, climate breakdown and ecological collapse is just an issue of the natural sciences, and it's very much a political issue, a sociological issue, a psychological issue. And so we need to tackle this from many disciplines. So obviously keeping in mind always the interdisciplinary angle when we understand sort of the root causes of these crises, sort of capitalism, colonialism, patriarchy, all these systems that are established so as to extract from the earth and to exploit people and keep them busy while this is happening. So I think interdisciplinarity is crucial. I would say beyond interdisciplinarity, it's also important that we are doing as well as learning. So like participating in the social movements as we're learning about the problem is important. One thing that really comes to mind is as in some of these actions, I talk about this in the book, one of the actions that we had in Germany. Before the actions, we were, as scientists involved in activism, we were getting together in this warehouse in Berlin where we were preparing for these actions. These were like occupations of car pavilions, of ministries, of governmental ministries. It was a whole week of actions. But before this could happen, we had to have training. We had to learn from each other about our different expertises. And as we were sort of co-learning with each other, we were also cooking our food together. We were rotating tasks. We were cleaning after each other. And so it was this sort of pre-action community that we built. It was modeled after these climate camps, which often precede many actions related to climate activism. But these were really a community that was horizontally run, that was run on principles of mutual aid and collective action. And I would say all of the people that were involved in this community were scientists, were academics. And, after we were done with these actions, we all go back to our little universities, our little silos. And I think we need to make our universities more like that, more like places in which learning and teaching are much more embedded and enmeshed with co-living. Another example to me of this were the Palestine encampments across Europe. These encampments set up to demand universities stop being complicit in the genocide in Palestine. But these camps were very horizontally run. They were run based on principles of mutual aid. They were providing lectures, providing documentaries, running a university within the university very effectively, and showing the university, look, this is a very different way in which we could be running our universities, not based on extreme hierarchies, and actually participating in things that are actually important to our local communities. So taking examples, sort of these prefigurative examples of communities run otherwise, academic communities run otherwise, are super important if we want to sort of enact the transformation broadly of academia itself, if we want to make academia actually supportive of the massive social and ecological transformation that is so urgently needed.
Fernando, it's a privilege for us to have you here. I really recommend people read your book, particularly scientists. Thank you so much
Thank you
for this interview.
Thank you so much.